We have a full panel here. Jeff Smith, Richard Jones, Gordon Chmilar, and an addition that I don't have my sheet here, Jefferson Gardner. Can we all give them a round of applause?
Hello, excellent. So gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Everyone, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come to this lovely, lovely summit so we can find out more about blockchain. So I am Emma Todd, and I am the CEO of MMH Group. We have offices in Toronto, New York, and Vancouver. I'm also the executive member of Blockchain for Impact, and we work with the United Nations to see how blockchain can help with their sustainable development goals. I'm going to let everybody else introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Jeff.
My name is Jeff Smith. I'm the president and CEO of Direct Cash Bank, or DC Bank. We're probably the first bank to bank blockchain as a business in Canada. And my background's payments. I used to own and operate a business called DC Payments, the second largest bank machine provider in the world, till we sold that in 2017. So again, my primary background in business is regulatory environment and moving money worldwide.
Yeah, my name is Gordon Chmilar. I'm a partner at Gowling WLG in corporate finance and M&A. I've been practicing that for the last 18 years in London and in Calgary. I really got into blockchain about 2015. We had a client that had a shell company listed that wanted to take a blockchain company public, so we did that in November 2015. So I think that was the first, or we believe to be the first, publicly listed blockchain company on a recognized exchange anywhere in the world. And really, since that time, I've been dealing with blockchain-related companies or crypto-related companies.
My name is Richard Jones. I'm a partner at McMillan LLP. I split my practice between commercial litigation, so I've got a litigator's view of things, and also between solicitor work, where I've worked in the natural resource industry, primarily agriculture and also water with respect to agriculture. I've really got first introduced to tech-type lawsuits dealing with Y2K, if you remember that. And from there, I've continued my interest through all the way now to blockchain.
My name is Jefferson Gardner. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Inbridge Incorporated. We focus on emerging technologies and the convergence of those technologies, everything from blockchain, IoT, AI, machine learning, and then we're even exploring some quantum applications. We focus on consulting, but also are actively developing product as well.
Let me take a pulse of the room. Who here does remember Y2K? Put your hands up. Okay, all right. We got a good group here, thank you, because I actually remember that. Everything's going to stop, just like what you said. Excellent. So we're going to get started with, and I don't know how much you guys know about blockchain, so we're going to dive right into that. So, while most people are familiar with blockchain, they might not know where blockchain evolved from and how we arrived here. Jefferson, do you want to explain that a little bit?
For those of you who have ever been in the performing arts and had lights on like this, I feel like I need to get up and do a dance while I explain this to keep your attention. One of the hardest things for me when I got into blockchain was finding out where the hell it even came from. Like, why do we need it? Why is it here? What's the problem that's existed? And obviously we can get into the Satoshi Nakamoto thing and why it was built for cryptocurrencies. But when you go back even further, and as I did more research, we got down to ledgers. Why did we keep ledgers? You can go back to the king's time and taxation and maintenance of all those things, and you would see them carving into stones, and it would be just a string of information, and it was just brutal. And then all of a sudden they were like, hey, maybe if we put these in rows and columns, we can find better information quicker. So then they moved to the column and row situation. For whatever reason, it escapes me. I have no idea why, when we digitized our world, why we went to what's called tab limited form, which is just basically a string of information with a legend at the top, and it became difficult for computational queries to search and find those things in high speed. So then we moved more towards a relational database, which is more Postgres, Oracle, where you're relating and creating rows and columns of information. And then as we progress, one of the biggest things is blockchain is essentially a database, and you can put information in and you can keep it there. And that's one of the big benefits that we have come to figure out. And I think I'll get more into some of the other applications later.
Excellent, thank you. So, as everybody knows, Canada's slow GDP growth has been all over recent headlines. And as a supporting player behind our industries, a stronger technology sector could help get our prosperity back on track. And believe me, you all know we need all the help we can get, right? So the question is, why do you believe that digital technologies like blockchain are important for moving our national economy forward? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Well, I think blockchain, you've got to separate cryptocurrencies from blockchain, and they both have unique applications to the economy of any sort of geography. Here in Canada, in particularly in Alberta, it's a very challenging economy, and anything that we can do in investing in technology to bring out the efficiencies in the business would be really fantastic. And if you think about blockchain in the trusted environment, you talk about databases, and there's a bunch of inefficiency in our networks and regulatory environments and things where blockchain can be of real value, identification, validation, again, removing trust out of data networks and the things like that. And the things that we're doing to improve those things will have a real efficiency on the economy of Canada. And cryptocurrency, on the flip side of that, the movement of money, the alternative to using fiat currency and other things to payment, that tech is really going to improve the cost structure for the end environment, subject to how the mining and the logging of the database economics work.
Yeah, well, I looked it up, and I guess Bloomberg ranks Canada in the last rankings at 22nd, I guess, overall in innovation and productivity. So obviously, as Jeff said, anything that we can do to be more efficient and be early adopters of technology that can make us more efficient.
I'm sorry, you said 22nd?
22nd in the
Out
world.
of 22?
No, in the entire world, yeah. Just
Okay.
barely above Russia. So just, yeah.
Only because they don't report.
Yeah, that's right. So just an example of earlier this week, I was reading about it. There's a pilot project of a bunch of oil and gas majors, and they're doing a pilot of using blockchain for payments and disputes with regards to water, oil and gas water in the field. And I guess the estimates, and I'm not sure how accurate they are, is that, in North America, if this technology works, I guess you could save $3.7 billion in cost savings just in the oil and gas water business.
3.7 billion is in savings
That's what they're estimating, yes.
per year or cumulative?
Didn't say per year, but I have to say that.
I do ask these questions. I really can get into it, guys. Can you tell? Okay, excellent. Sorry, continue, sir.
So I looked at it from a slightly different angle of, where's Canada at with respect to digital technologies, and what resources do we have to really advance Canada on that platform? And when you take a look at the OECD countries, we are one of the most highly educated populations in the OECD countries. So we've got more college graduates than any of the OECD countries. Our education is cheaper than most of these countries. So where does that put us as far as emerging technologies? Well, we've got the ability to have people highly educated who can do so relatively cheaply compared with south of the border, where it's almost 10 times as much to get an education than it is up here, where we can quickly mobilize to get in front of these emerging technologies. Further, our immigration policy is a little more expanded than some other countries in the OECD. And so we can attract people who already have this skill set to assist us in what we've got already. And the other thing I think we've got going for it is that we've already got a name in this area. We've already had Canadian companies who have done extraordinarily well in the world stage in technology. For instance, we've got Ubisoft, right? We've got BioWare, which is here. So on the gaming front, we're starting to become and are a large country, or a country where people want to come here because we've got the resources to assist them. And I think that's what we need to start looking at, is how do we develop even more, and particularly how do we get more women into this space? How do we get them in the mathematics programs and the engineering programs?
Very nice. I totally agree with you.
I couldn't have segued better with the whole women in STEM thing. So I'm from Lethbridge, and we just got awarded $1.68 million for women in STEM to train and teach, so that's kind of cool. Another part of that is actually where Emma and I met was in Toronto at the Crypto Chicks conference. And we were able to take 7 women, 4 from the university, 2 from the college and 1 from a high school out there. And one of the problems was hey, use blockchain and create some sort of novel application. And so we trained them in how to do blockchain. We taught them extracurricular outside of that to IoT and a few other applications, and really tried to expand their minds on what can you do and blockchain becomes the backbone. And we looked at one of the hot topics, canola issue, China embargo, pork. All of our products are getting banned from there. Obviously, there's a lot of political issues there. But the solution we came up with was IoT system sensors that recognize any type of contaminant, high-low temperatures, moisture changes, and we could actually track and maintain that data in a dormant state until it reached certain access points. And then there'd be a wake-up query that would initiate, wake up the data, send it over, and it would all encrypted. And so for Canada to take a step in that direction and actually implement these technologies, we can legitimately say that we have the best, most verified data around our food especially, or any type of export with that respect. I know the Canadian government's investing a ton of money. There's a huge RFP for the steel industry where they're wanting to not only track steel that's in Canada, what mine it's coming from and what engine or what component it ends up in, but also exports. Or imports, so steel that's coming in from China, whether it's got 5% nickel in it. So these types of things can be verified. It just takes a lot of these emerging technologies to fit into that piece and start tracking and verify it in a decentralized way.
Excellent. So Jefferson, do you want to expand on whether or not, like, some of the additional barriers to adoption that blockchain may have? Because I think most of us are here because we're interested in it, but not everyone's necessarily a convert like I am. I totally am. And I'm just wondering, and I'm going to be asking this to everyone, are there any barriers to adoption that you can see that you haven't mentioned?
One that I'll focus on, I could go in a whole bunch of different directions, but I think one of the biggest barriers to adoption right now is education. So hands off to Kalea for putting on this event and the number of other people that were involved in this, because education is the forefront of even understanding what these technologies can do, and then it helps with our creative minds to be able to go, okay, now that I know the deep application of the physiology of how this digital technology works, now I can understand how it integrates with all these other systems. And that, I think, is definitely the biggest barrier. We talk with lots of agricultural clients wanting to trace food from seed all the way to plate, and they freak out. They're scared because there's a lack of education. We literally had a bunch of farmers come back from a Calgary event in Lethbridge, and these farmers were like, oh, you can't do blockchain, don't do blockchain, because then everybody can look up your skirt. And the reference was essentially that they'll see all of your data. And I'm just going, oh, okay, this is just, it's a naivety, really. It's a level of ignorance, and it's not their fault, because there's a lot of bad players out there. And I would say, second in that, one of the biggest barriers to entry is having the right people that actually know educate you.
So super quick, were they educated on, it's not what they think, it's making the world a better place, and while blockchain isn't for everyone, this can definitely help them? So
one of the most frustrating things is we had a long conversation. We'd been working with this company for a while. We were wanting to basically track their Hascat berries. So they were developing berries, and we had described, explained everything, permission blockchain, you don't have to show everybody your data. It just, because he got in a room with a bunch of other farmers that were his colleagues or his comrades, when the majority of them all went, no way, blockchain's evil. That's when they were like, when he's like, well, maybe these guys are lying to me. And so there's just so much misinformation out there. And I think that's one of the biggest issues, is there's just too much garbage.
Excellent. I'm gonna switch it up. Gordon, do you wanna go next?
Yeah, well, I guess just from my standpoint, I guess we're dealing with clients, public companies or private companies, and that are not necessarily the crypto side, but just blockchain enterprise, whether it's building blockchain apps or different platforms. It seems like you can get to the pilot stage, and I think you see that on a lot of things you read about. There's a lot of pilots that are going on there, but how do you take it to the next step to actually have someone purchase what you're trying to sell, your product or your technology, and actually have it implemented? And I'm a believer in blockchain, and I want to say that up front, but I guess what sometimes is what's left out is the theoretical, what blockchain can do for everyone. And instead of thinking about, okay, from a business standpoint, some business fundamentals, what kind of value am I going to bring to this potential customer? Is my product that much more efficient? Is it actually saving money? If it is, quicker, is it actually how much faster is it than a regular database that they're actually going to pay you money to adopt, to adopt it? And then obviously the next part is, you're doing these pilots. A lot of times companies don't want to pay you to do the pilots. It's, you get it free, and then there's questions about who owns the IP and so on and so forth. So that's from my standpoint is like I said, is to get it to that next step is really just to go back to some of the business fundamentals, I guess.
Excellent, thank you. Richard?
think part of it is the psychology of early adoption, right? Do you want to be bleeding edge, or do you want to hop on once everyone else is on? And in these early stages, it's that encouragement to get people to hop on the wagon. Part of it, I think, and we should be able to see it, and the Government of Canada and Government of Alberta are doing it, is in relation to government procurement, right? Using blockchain for government procurement and having smart contracts on top of the blockchain. That, I think, is a good model, which will then, I hope, show Canadians that this isn't so bad. This is a pretty good thing to use. Part of the issue, I think, will be initially is, what's the user interface going to be like? Is it going to be too complicated so that people are scared from it and like, well, did you look at that government website? I can't even figure this out. This is worse than doing your taxes, right? And so it's got to be a simplified way to use it, and I think the government has got to be a model in using blockchain so that we can start having it so it becomes ordinary in what we do, in what industry and enterprise does.
Like, just without thinking, it just becomes use blockchain.
Yeah, so it doesn't become this big scary thing of, oh my goodness, all my data's gone, all my privacy's gone. I'm not saying that there aren't any privacy issues, and those do arise from time to time, but I think that once it becomes trusted, once it becomes known, then there'll be greater adoption.
Okay, excellent. Jeff?
Well, I think there's really a couple of things. One is what the guys have talked about, which is the knowledge curve. And one of the biggest issues is the knowledge curve just isn't there. When you walk into a room, you'll have 40 people, and there'll be one person that understands blockchain, but you got 39 naysayers, and it's hard to convince 39 in an hour. You know, the reality is you have to get up to that knowledge curve. The next thing I think is there's a bunch of, of the knowledge curve, and I see this in the bank all the time, and the processing business, there's applications that blockchain makes 0 sense. There's nothing wrong with a database that responds in milliseconds, that doesn't have a trusted environment, that you don't need validation services from a third party. So let's not waste time, energy, and money trying to change those things. An Oracle database is pretty fantastic, it's pretty fast. But from an identification standpoint, blockchain makes total sense. And then the third thing is understanding the security. Many people, like you guys have mentioned, people don't understand the security of the system. You don't have to have privacy concerns. It doesn't have to share everything. It only has to give you a response. I think, and knowledge, understanding the business application, and the economics would be the three things that I think.
So guys, a couple of things that Jeff just said that we want to touch on. Blockchain isn't necessarily for everyone. Sometimes a database will do, so keep that in mind. And the second thing I want to bring up is that if you guys have any questions, we're going to have a question and answer period, but you can also tweet us above, so you can see that, okay? So the question is for you guys, and I'm going to actually start off with Gordon. Where do you think blockchain technologies can have an impact on streaming our regulatory system? You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks. Well, obviously you read all the different potential use cases out there for governments, whether it's government records, land registration, corporate registration, and the like. For me personally, as corporate finance a lawyer, you obviously see the potential out there. We 2 years ago had a lot of people coming talking to us about ICOs and the potential that they bring, which is democratizing corporate finance, and maybe I don't know if there's any iBankers in the room, but not having iBankers, maybe you'd be able to sell your securities to the entire retail world. So there's potential there, but obviously it butts up against current securities legislation and makes it difficult to do out of Canada. The regulators themselves are just still trying to get their heads around it. I talked to the Alberta Securities Commission or the OSC or the exchanges, and they're starting to learn about the technology. They're getting up the curve. They want to take advantage of it, but obviously they have their own mandates to protect the public and the like. So, and they feel pressure as well, because obviously there's competition out there. You read about different jurisdictions that are adopting blockchain, whether it's Delaware with respect to securities or your corporate records, or the talk about different whether it's Gibraltar or whatever, different jurisdictions about having their own, allowing you to do ICOs or token offerings and the like. So, difficult, I guess, difficult to say. Government, we try to say to people that, they're listening and they want to work with you, but it just doesn't happen quickly. Like, we just cannot, go to the Securities Commission and get an answer instantly. It's going to take time and, potential regulation.
It does take time, it really does. Jeff, anything you want to add to this?
Well, I think one of the things you have to think about where blockchain will really help is in a trusted environment where you need a third-party verification. So things like identity has a true application. Things where you need information quickly, it can't be verified, and you need more than one party to verify. Land titles is another. PPSA registration, personal property registry, where you want to register and understand security. All the things that take time where you have to go out to third parties to validate. For example, how do you validate, from a banking perspective, how do you validate that Jeff Smith is Jeff Smith and he controls that bank account? Well, I have to pull up TransUnion, I have to trust them that they've got the right answer, and then I've got to go validate this other person versus having all that pre-validated in advance, making a decision for me. I think where you have real trust environments, that's where you can get real value from blockchain, real value.
So that was really good. So one of the difficulties of being a moderator is I just totally want to go in there and just start asking the hard-hitting questions. So I'm hoping you guys will definitely make some notes so you can ask those for me when the Q&A section comes up. But my other question is, and Jefferson, I am going to start with you, my friend, as soon as it all shows up again.
Well, you're looking, I can comment on something else.
Okay.
Just going back to like what Jeff said is with a lot of the barriers and and what I said earlier, the fear-mongering, equally as detrimental to the blockchain ecosystem can be the overhype. Is that, you've got, I can't remember what the show's called, with the Gru and the little girl and the character, and she gets that big fluffy unicorn, and she's like, and she's shaking and she's screaming, fluffy.
I'm sorry, what?
It's a Disney show, I think.
Okay.
Gru, oh gosh, I'm gonna forget this. I have kids, so
Can anyone help him out? Does anybody know what he's talking about?
Despicable Me, there we go, thanks for the So,
I no longer think he's weird. I'm like, what?
Some of us have earlier versions of Disney.
Yeah, there you go. So in that movie, there's this little girl, and she gets like so excited where she's shaking, vibrating. And I feel like sometimes there's people that get into this ecosystem who vibrate, and they overhype it. And then because it's overhyped and it doesn't live up to some people's expectation, because some people go, oh my gosh, blockchain's a panacea, it's going to fix everything. And that's not the reality, is what Jeff said earlier. You have to look at your problem and deconstruct it backwards to figure out if blockchain's even for you. And maybe blockchain isn't, but maybe a different DLT is.
Yeah.
Sorry, distributed ledger technology.
So actually, building on what you just said, how do you think blockchain can help more traditional companies become competitive?
Well, let me look at it from an agricultural standpoint. I looked at an ag person and they were like, well, what's the point? What's the point of blockchain? I don't get it. Because I can walk out, I've been on my land for 30 years, I lick my finger, I put it up in the air, and I feel the wind, and I know what I'm doing that day. And the question arose that, okay, well, how long do you plan on keeping your land? Well, I don't know, my son might take it over, but we might be selling it. Well, is there a way for you to get top dollar for it? Well, I've got a bunch of data points on yields and all these types of things over the period of time. And I said, well, that's great, but still there's trust issue there. Someone that's going to purchase it is going, yeah, okay, of course you're going to try and get top dollar for your land because that's your benefit, right? So you're going to fudge numbers. Potentially, not everybody's a malicious player. But using blockchain and having third parties verify those types of data entries through the use of IoT sensor networks, we can keep a historical record, and that historical record grows. And that historical record can then be verified and validated by third parties continually through that entire period of time. Therefore, when you do go to sell that plot of land, you can say, I can, without me saying that I fudged these numbers, a third party verified all of these details. Boom, now I have better value versus my neighbor who might be selling the same amount of land, but they don't have the verified data behind them over a longer period of time. Because it's the same thing with AI. The longer the historical record of information and data that you have, the better the AI performs.
Excellent. Richard, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So in relation to ag as well, crop insurance, for example. So you have verifiable data. Crop insurance company can come in, they can take a look at what this verifiable data is and get a better history of what's happened on your land. And then they'll be able to give you a more accurate assessment as to, well, what's the risk? and what sort of premium you're going to pay as a result of that. Now, you can extrapolate that to any kind of supply chain, right? Of if there's monitoring along that supply chain of what's the risk, what sort of premium are you going to pay? So if your business practices aren't all that great, based on the monitoring that's going to happen, you're going to pay a higher premium because the insurer will know, well, this is how I'm going to assess the risk to you. If your business practices are very good, then your risk is going to be lower. So you're going to have a lower premium. And so rather than everyone paying the same rate, all shippers of grain paying the same rate, it's going to be more specific. I think it's better for the insurance companies because then they can determine what is my risk in relation to this particular person rather than the demographic of this person.
See, having been in insurance, we had this huge issue where people were generalized and they were thrown into pockets. So any female between 18 and 25 had a higher insurance rate, premium, than most males in that same category because statistically, as they collected details, women were accordingly bad drivers, according to the data. And that's absolutely ridiculous. So
I am a good driver, people. I'm a very good driver.
So that's just how insurance companies set premiums. And so when you look at the ability to track, and some people freak out and they go, are you going to put this stuff on my car and keep details or data about it? But it enables us as people to get what we should deserve based on the things we do.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm curious, this is a question for everyone, and we'll be starting with Jeff. Where can blockchain technology support or trade growth and help companies expand internationally?
So I think about trade growth and other things. So as some of the panel members talked about, we have a great educational system here in Canada. We have a great technology training ground, and taking that technology internationally, and particularly in oil field services, and again in that trusted environment. And when I say the word trust, I also pair that with due diligence, where due diligence is required in networks. And I have a view that due diligence isn't always something you want to add in reporting because you're going to have a high cost of reporting or infrastructure, and more data is not always better, it's sometimes worse. So you got to be careful what you're gathering and how you're putting it together. That said, I think that blockchain has a real application in all kinds of trusted networks, and particularly in recording information, data information. I think in the food networks, and particularly here in Canada, you think about mad cow disease that was apparently perpetrated in Canada. If you can track from farm to table for your food, you can. The due diligence required of that is very important globally. As we have our global borders are opened, I think that anything that we can do to due diligence and grow that technology here in Canada is how we improve our global position.
That's really good, excellent. So I'm going to switch it up and have Jefferson go next. Keep it all interesting for you guys.
As I mentioned earlier with respect to our exports, trading and getting those things out of here, Canada already has an amazing reputation. Lethbridge in this southern Alberta region is known as one of the safest food producers in the world. But as anybody knows, how do you stay competitive? Well, you've got to up your game. How do you increase in your practices or your policies so that you can up the game? And so when you have these tracking metrics within the food industry, that allows us to better export, and people don't have to just trust Canada. With respect to other types of businesses, these type of technologies, I think, will enable people to more easily, like we've already got a globalized world, right? And we've got these incredible supply chains, but the supply chains are so broken up. You've got import-export stations that have multiple stakeholders that are managing and messing with stuff. There's too much human involvement, hands-on, there's error potential. So quality of product when it arrives in a location is a whole different thing, and can we actually track and verify that? There's an issue with a hay shipper that sent a sea can over to Korea, and because they couldn't track through IoT and actually recognize and pull that information onto a blockchain and verify it, the Koreans were actually taking the sea can, leaving it on deck because the humidity was so high, and they would let it mold. And it would mold the first top 3 inches of it, and when they opened up the sea can, they were like, oh, mold. And they would contact the shipper out of Canada and say, we're sending it back. And they went, oh, no, we're not paying to get that ship back because we don't want it either. And they knew that that's what was going to happen. So what they did was they made the claim on insurance, scraped the top 3 inches off, and used the hay anyways. And so you have two sides of this equation where people, how do you trust everyone? And they didn't know this until they actually put a sensor that wasn't real-time connected. They put it in the CCAN station, and it sent and it had a geolocation, and they went and retrieved it. And that's when they were able to notice that it was being left in port for over 4 weeks.
I have no words. Does anyone? Like, I can't believe that. Wow. Gordon, you're up after that.
Again, I just come from it from the corporate finance side. You know, the capital markets here in Canada and the exchanges here in Canada. You know, we've been built up, and largely thanks to Alberta with a lot of junior oil and gas companies. But you know, the markets and the ability to get listed and raise money for junior companies at an earlier stage, you have that possibility in Canada. So you see things like, you know, like I said, at one time, a lot of junior oil and gas companies, or you see a lot of, you know, smaller cannabis companies, and we saw, you know, in the last few years, and it's lesser now, but you know, a big rise in blockchain-related companies getting listed on the TSX Venture Exchange. You know, and like I said, you can get listed at a much smaller, you know, at a much earlier stage than versus the United States or in London and so on. So, you know, that's another opportunity for, you know, that we're always looking for new business, and we try to get international companies or international blockchain-related companies to, you know, talk about them listing here in Canada and the like we used to do for oil and gas companies, and you know, still somewhat for mining companies. So that's another opportunity.
There you go. Richard, anything you want to add to that?
I think there's two ways that it can help, right? And that is we can reduce the cost, the transaction cost, or we can increase productivity. One of the aspects I've been looking at is how do we increase the productivity of irrigated agriculture in southern Alberta. So southern Alberta relies primarily on irrigation, and I deal with a number of irrigation districts and water allocation off the Bow River. And the Bow River and the South Saskatchewan River Basin is like a closed basin. So how do we deal with these large water licenses and the efficient use of water and transactions that can happen so that individual producers and farms can receive information in real time as to what the allocation is and what the water availability is. And not only look through the province of Alberta, but into Saskatchewan as well, and where that South Saskatchewan River goes. So for example, we have to deliver by way of agreement. Alberta's got an agreement with Saskatchewan. We've got to deliver 50% of the water in the Bow River, South Saskatchewan Basin to Saskatchewan, whether they need it or not. Well, why can't we cooperate with Saskatchewan and find out, do you need the water today? And if they don't, if we're dry, why can't we use more today? If we're really wet and they're dry, why can't we allocate more to them? And so I think that there's technologies which we can use, which will allow us to free up some of the water we've got in this province so that we can make irrigated land even more productive and also make dry land irrigated land.
That's really good. That would make me very, very happy. So this is my next questions for Gordon and also for Jeff. In the next few decades, what are your predictions for how blockchain will play in our future economy? I know we've touched on it, but we'll let you start, Gordon.
Predict the future, I guess.
Yes.
I get lots of questions from family members like, what's Bitcoin going to be next year? And I always, the same response.
Guaranteed wrong.
Yeah, my response is, if I knew that answer, I'd be on my private jet right now. But, you know, I'm in my office. But, like I said, I believe in blockchain, and it's the enthusiasm is great. But like I said, a lot of times, people that have come to us with their white papers and the like, and they have, you know, an idea, this, you know, very optimistic idea that they have come up with something that no one else has thought about with blockchain, and they're going to revolutionize, you know, the entire retail distribution system, or they're going to put a whole city on blockchain. And you know, maybe we will get to that point in decades to come, but I guess just in the immediate future, you know, hopefully we see some, you know, adoption, you know, besides the crypto, but some adoption of, you know, of some of the bigger companies or enterprises of adoption of blockchain solutions. And obviously people believe in it, because you can see the money that IBM and Microsoft and Facebook are putting into blockchain. So it's, you know, difficult for me to predict. Like I said, when it comes to the ICO thing, you see a lot of potential there, and that you know, potential for corporate finance. And I think once it's kind of let out of the bag, it's really hard to bring it back. And you know, obviously securities legislation and different legislation of governments is going to do that, but it's still, I think they even realize that, you know, they're going to have to adapt. like I said, you're not going to put that fundraise or that ability to raise money through tokens and let it back into the box.
Jeff, anything to add?
So I think there's two components here. One is the cryptocurrencies, which is, the last time I looked, there was 1,500 or 1,700 cryptocurrencies. And I haven't looked, honestly, in a few months. But I think when you look at that, there's going to be, that business is here to stay. I think that you look at that and you say there's going to be 5 or 6. One of the issues there is, fungibility of money, timing of locking down transactions. But I think that's actually a good solution, and they've been able to prove that there's a business case there for that. And then when I look at blockchain, I'm a believer in blockchain, but blockchain's a piece of the solution. It's not the panacea. And what I mean by that is we talked about blockchain has to be married with other technologies to make it work. If you want blockchain to work, you need it in a high trust environment. You need the Internet of Things to have data and tokens to feed it information and lock down information. It's going to be a component of the future. And it's going to be a component of the future in those areas where you need trust and due diligence validated for third parties. It doesn't necessarily work in a simple database structure that you just need high speed. But certainly if you want water rights so that every farmer knows that Fred didn't just enter that he only took 10 gallons, that he actually took 10,000. You want that locked down? You need some verification, locked down, verified. That's where it works.
So Ben has told me that we have time for one question.
No,
but
we have time. But
okay, good.
Yeah, we have like 10 minutes now.
Okay, all right. Okay, excellent. So I will then ask the next 2 questions. So this is a question for Richard. I'm going to start with you first, and then and then Gordon can answer after. How do you think blockchain can positively or negatively impact the legal profession?
I think it's a very interesting time for the legal profession. I think that depending upon the way blockchain is used, and if you've got a layering of smart contracts on top of the blockchain, that it could add more certainty to transactions, which means that you're going to reduce litigation. Now, litigators aren't going to be very happy, but solicitors will, because you're going to need to have that input up front to define clearly what are the terms of the contract which are going to be overlaid with respect to this transaction, so that they're knowable and that they're certain. And that's particularly what people want. They want to be certain that if I contract for X, I'm getting X, right? And am I going to get some sort of indemnity? Am I not going to get an indemnity? What am I getting? And so I think what you're going to see is you're going to have to see a bit of investment by people into legal fees a little more upfront, which means you're going to save a heck of a lot of money on the back.
That's where I was going with that, right? Am I going to save money with my lawyers?
So that's where we're going. I think it's going to be a net plus, but for some litigation shops, it's going to be a bit of a negative because there's going to be less commercial litigation.
Yeah, I have clients telling us all the time they're going to put us out of business with blockchain and AI and the like. And you are seeing some. There's a UK firm. They call themselves the first decentralized law firm, and there is one in the US that just raised a bunch of money, and they are using kind of senior partners at the top, backed up by a bunch of AI. But even just for personally, I hate to admit it, but in corporate finance, so there's a lot of repetition in some of the things that we do. So if some of that could be automated, then for our clients,
then we could save money?
Well, I think we provide greater value for our clients because we could focus on things that provides their value, like better due diligence and the like. So that's the hope there. And even just some simple things, like for example, a lot of companies still, public companies issue paper share certificates, and if somebody loses that, it's a complete nightmare to get to go to the transfer agent and get a new share certificate issued. You have to get an indemnity bond, and it's just a lot of paperwork. If the client's asking us for help on that, we can't always charge the amount of time and work that it actually takes to do this for them because we're trying to make them happy. But simple things like that could help us. There could be share certificates issued through blockchain or the like. It's going to help us.
Excellent. Thank you. So thank you, gentlemen. I have one last question. It's like my favorite question I've been waiting to ask. Does anyone have a WTF, and F means fudge, a story they'd like to share with regards to blockchain?
I got a good one, a really good one. If you don't know about this, it's really exciting. So essentially, somebody tried to go through an ICO, and you got this maliciousness within the industry. And I remember reading this story and going, what the fudge? And these guys built a team, they falsified their university credentials, posted on LinkedIn, created a whole ecosystem of information about themselves. Developed a white paper, put it out there, raised $35 million. I apologize, cover yours if you don't want to hear this word, but they emptied their website the next day after and put the word penis on it. And it was like the ultimate insult to the world because of the non-regulatory stance for the ICOs, they got away with it. And those are the guys that ruined the reputation of what blockchain's potential really is. And that's where the last thing I'll say is, from an evolution standpoint, we were in an infancy. And if you're looking at from an evolution of humans, it took us a while. We got fins, then we got on Earth, and then we got legs, and we're bipedalism and all that kind of stuff. We are just at the point where we're just getting blockchain's legs now. And that's what we need to understand, is that now's the time. We're on that bell curve, and we're just hitting up. And I think the future's really exciting.
Excellent, thank you. That upset me a little, but I'm gonna get over it. But everybody, please be careful with your money. Please be careful, okay. Anyone else? Does anyone have anything that they can share? Or would this be afterwards, we'll meet and have a drink and then you can tell? Jeff, no.
I'm in the banking business, but it amazes me. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. Yeah. If you're not getting your money back, there's a reason. If you're not getting paid, there's a reason. If you're getting too good of a deal, there's a reason. And think about it. Like, blockchain is no different, cryptocurrencies are no different. You should be paid, you should be settled. There's no, and I see those things happen every day. We see them in the paper. And, to be honest, that's one of the reasons I entered the blockchain business, because I felt that, if guys and girls that I thought shouldn't be successful because they were saying things that shouldn't be right, people should want to bank at a place where they are going to be right. If they've got $1, they're going to get $1 back. I think my WTF is really think about what you're doing. If it sounds too good to be true, think twice.
That's true. Anyone else?
I could do another one.
Actually, I'm going to table that one. We will meet you for drinks and you can tell us. I don't want to find out, does anyone have any questions that you want to ask us? How many minutes do we have, Ben?
We've got about 7 minutes.
Oh, okay. Ooh, we might be able to come back to that. Does anyone have any questions you want to ask?
I have a Jeff question, actually. Hi.
DC Bank Jeff?
Yeah, DC Bank Jeff. So you've been banking crypto and blockchain companies for a really long time, and something that we hear about from
Long is
longer than I've been in the space.
That's saying something too.
So my first crypto clients, you were the banker for. What is the thing back in the day that made you look at it and decide, yeah, this is worth the risk, it's worth doing, and what keeps you here?
So the reason I was approached as a banker, and appreciate, we're a small Canadian bank. So, this is DC Bank, this is Royal Bank. We're a small Canadian bank. We have 2 shareholders, me being one and another. And I was approached by a number of parties to bank the blockchain business. And I come from the payment space. Candidly, cryptocurrencies is just a payment methodology. That's all it is. Yes, it's fancy. Yes, it does a bunch of other things, but it's just a payment method. So I like the payment method, but the folks that I met, I couldn't bank. And a lot of the reason I couldn't bank them because they always wanted to do these transactions anonymously. Well, we don't want anybody to know. Well, I can't help you. I'm a bank. We have to know, and so does, and it's only fair that everybody else knows because that's how it works. So what I thought when I started banking and why I stuck around is because not everybody was like that. A significant number of the other people wanted to find ways to make the cryptocurrency technology work. They wanted to comply with all the rules. And I thought, all the other banks from a competitive standpoint don't want to do this. They get scared because they've met the 4 guys that are crazy. They've met the 4 guys that are in the paper that, died in some town somewhere apparently. And I thought there was a tremendous opportunity to bank all the legitimate people that really want to grow this business. That's really the opportunity that I saw.
Any other questions? Sir.
Good catch.
Is it working? Okay.
It's full. Is it full?
I had
Okay.
a question just about procurement. I think Richard brought it up about the use of blockchain in procurement. What I'm wondering is, how does blockchain work into existing ERP systems like SAP or Oracle, and what sort of data can you get out of that, and does it just fit it all? Because I feel like that could be a big holdup to its incorporation into larger companies and government in the future. So.
That's a great question. I'm a lawyer. I don't have knowledge on precisely how that would work. I've dealt with clients who are working with that. I don't ask them how it works, because quite frankly, like I said, I'm a lawyer. I'm not a computer scientist. But certainly that's something that you look at, and you know what sort of information is going to be shared, right? There's going to be agreements that you're going to need with the existing vendor that you've got of your software as to what sort of interaction you're going to have. And so typically that needs to be in place before you ever export that data out. So certain data is proprietary to that software. And so you got to be very careful of, are you breaching your license agreement when you're exporting data to another program?
You've got somebody up here that can answer that question or add some value. Can you answer that question?
But I need the mic. Okay, sweet. So I think what I heard you ask was, how are you integrating blockchains into existing ERPs? Like, how is that working today? So what I can tell you that the current state is that everybody is integrating blockchains into their current ERP right now, because they can't just stop business as is today. So it's definitely using JavaScript and other things like that. It's getting integrated into Oracle, SAP, you name it. But future state, I don't know where that's going to be. Any existing business can't just rip out their existing operations, so it is legacy integration to systems today. However, if the data is better, faster, coming off the blockchain, you can still always look at the blockchain as the system of record. So it's not an issue, it's just integrating it into legacy may not be the future state, but that is what's currently happening with our clients.
Janine, is that you?
That's me.
Do you want to tell everyone who you are?
Sure. So my name is Janine Moyer, and I'm the National Blockchain Assurance Leader at Deloitte.
She's a powerhouse, people. Just good to know.
Thanks, Emma.
Does anyone else have any questions? I thought I saw a hand up there. No? Going once? Going twice? Anyone? Okay, well, thank you guys so much. It was great being here. Thank you, gentlemen, for the panel.